Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam, and I'm about to start the show as always, and I want to give you your Tuesday tasking. Let's say you're listening to the radio and there's an expert on there, or you are watching television and the news and somebody gives an opinion or an analysis. I want you to do research. That's what I want you to do. I want you to look at the person, okay? And I want you to look them up online, see what you can see about them. And then if it's a doctor, for instance, like Sanjay Gupta, look at what they're saying and see if it's opinion versus fact. Very simple. I mean, if they're a heart surgeon, they should probably be talking about heart surgery and some other medicines, I guess. But as soon as they get into the Trump game and they're a doctor, you know that there's a problem there. And it's the same thing with everything else. If you have a SEAL and they're talking about insurance, look them up. See if they have any experience in that field. But what you're probably going to be finding nowadays, because this is the way the news works, none of them are going to be experts. There's very few experts in the news now. So just do this one thing. When you see an expert, quote unquote, on television or you hear them on the radio, look them up and see who it really is, and then determine if there's somebody that's even worth listening to. That's your Tuesday tasking, and let's start the show. This is Jonathan Gilliam back on the Experts Podcast. Happy Tuesday. The truth has arrived. And today in the news is a lot like it was yesterday in the news. There's a lot, but it's a lot of the same, of course, but it's these headlines that are just pointing towards something that's happening, something that's occurring. And we're going to get into it, and I'm going to show you, with that tasking that I gave you at the beginning of the show, how important it is to look at the people that are reporting this stuff to you and how biased they are. Because as I've been pointing out over and over again on these shows, is that there's a picture being painted by the headlines, and it's very interesting because it's not like the news media is getting together and painting this overall picture. In fact, I would think that they're trying not to. But this is the interesting thing about the truth, is that even when you're trying to hide it, the truth is still there. And a lot of the times when people are working together in a conspiracy, whether it be to commit a criminal act or in the case of media to push out fake news, what happens is the truth is still existing, and somehow the picture keeps getting painted. And when I'm looking at these headlines, the ones that I pulled up today, what you start to see is, again, this clear picture of how the left is moving. And it's, quite frankly, at times when I look at it, it's mind-boggling that it's even a question to young people or lifelong Democrats or conservatives who are people who may not even be political, but they just don't see anything that they have to be in a rush about. And as I said yesterday, it's not damned if we do, damned if we don't. It's damned if we don't. If we don't start acting, we will be damned. And this country will be damned, and that will have an effect on the rest of the world. But things are occurring that are in such plain sight now, they're not even being hidden. And by and large, people are not liking it, but they're not doing anything about it. They leave it up to the president. I remember that was one of my main concerns when Trump got elected was, is he going to be looked upon as just this almighty savior, and people just won't do anything? Like they'll think he just is going to take care of all of it. And historically, that has reoccurred over and over again. And actually, that is what's happened in the United States. We did the right thing in electing a president that has nothing to do, or very little to do, with the deep state. He's not a part of it. He wasn't a part of it, and he's been hammered by it ever since he's been in. But the people just feel like, okay, we hired him. He's going to take care of everything. And unfortunately, that's not the way it works in the real world. You know, just like communism preaches this fake utopia that will never work. Well, the founding fathers didn't preach a utopia. They preached service. And unfortunately, free people who are comfortable will paint their own picture. And that picture is the same as, you know, I've seen this time and time again, where people do not have a lot of money, but they spoil their children at a very young age. And those children have a concept that's created in their mind that they think they can afford and get whatever they want. And their parents will just get it for them. And quite frankly, that's not the case in these types of families that don't have money. And that's, you know, could lead people to doing things that they wouldn't do normally for money. It also creates a spoiled type of attitude, and that never works out well for anybody. It ends up causing people a lot of problems because they become self-entitled, self-centered, narcissistic. Yes, being spoiled can do that. Drug addicts, believe it or not, drug addicts, if you ever want to see somebody who's spoiled, watch that show that used to be on, I don't remember what station it was called Intervention. And the common themes throughout all those is that the person that's addicted is spoiled. And when I mean spoiled, I'm not meaning that they're rich and they have everything they want, but they're spoiled to the drug. The drug makes them feel good, and they build a dependency on it, sometimes chemically, but most of the time it might be chemical all the time, but by and large, it's going to be the physical feeling that they get from it, and they become addicted to that feeling, and they become brats, spoiled brats, because they will do anything to fulfill their self-centered need to feel good. So that's what's happened to the United States and really to the world in general. And when that happens, bad things will come in. I don't know if I've ever told this story before. I worked in this gym when I lived in Pasadena, California. And a lot of interesting things happened when I worked in that gym. This is like in 1990, I believe. And I grew up in Arkansas. I went to one semester in college there, and then left and went to California, stayed there for a year, and then got into their city college system because I became a resident. And at city college in California, all these people talk about free college. You basically have it, the city colleges in California. I mean, it already existed there back in the 90s, probably even before that. I don't know when it started, and you get the same professors that you would have in the big colleges who would come there and teach. So your education is really good education. And you would buy books. That's basically, the tuition was very cheap. I don't know if it's still that way, but it was then, and it worked out well for me because I was able to finish my undergrad and then go back to Arkansas. But when I was working in this gym, I ended up living upstairs in the gym under an unfortunate set of circumstances where I had a motorcycle crash. The person that I was living in their house, they moved, and I had nowhere to go. So I ended up, after 6 months of just terrible, I had a terrible motorcycle crash. My whole left arm was just completely casted for 6 months. And it was bad. And, you know, I had a concussion and lacerations in my skull. And so when I started to get back on my feet, I'd already been working in a gym. I went back to work in the gym, but I literally had no money. I had no place to live, so I had to live upstairs. They had tanning bedrooms and mats, workout mats on the floor, and I would just go up there every night and sleep. And I had my stuff stored in a room up there. that has nothing to do with what I'm about to tell you, but this is how I met this guy. He was and it's very interesting. His name was David, and in the Bible, David and Jonathan were very close. And I got to know this guy, and he was a giant, man. This guy was huge. And he was believe it or not, you would never know this if you met him. He did not fit the stereotypical picture that you would think of when you would think of a missionary, not a Mormon. This guy was Christian, fundamental Christian, and he would go to China and teach English and other things, and then also work as a missionary over there and witnessing to people. And some of the stories that this guy had were absolutely amazing. I had many conversations with him. Unfortunately, lost touch with him. It was almost like he, and I'm sure you've had this where people come into your life and then go out of your life. You're like, and you look back on it, you're like, was that like an angel, or was that just meant to happen for that period of time so I could learn something? But anyway, he was telling me that there was a team of them that were over there, and they weren't like in the city. These guys were out in the middle of nowhere, where there's no money. Imagine, how China is now. Imagine in 1990 how impoverished it was then. And so they would go there, and they had a team of guys, and I think some women as well. And it was so poor they had campfires at night. And so they were sitting around basically a campfire, and they had said some prayers, and they called. I know this isn't what you expected when I started talking about the news, but you're going to get what I'm saying here, okay? So he calls out. One of them called out and said, "If there's any demons or spirits here, we cast you out in the name of Jesus." And one of the missionaries that was there, this guy that they had known for years and years, and who was a devout Christian, he said that the guy's voice completely changed into something that he had never heard, a deep, bellowing voice, and the voice spoke up and said, "I am Legion, and I don't have to do anything that you say." And they started having a conversation with this guy, and they're like, they thought he was playing a joke at first, but it was no joke. And they asked him, who are you? And he repeated, I am Legion, is what he would say. And they said, "Well, aren't you so-and-so, whoever this guy was?" And he said, "I came into him at a very young age." And like, "How do you come into somebody?" And he said, this reminds me of like one of those Scooby-Doo cartoons where the bad guy confesses everything right before they get caught, So he says that at a very young age, the environment in his home was so bad, and the drug use and all this weird stuff that was going on in their house, it was so bad that he just slipped right in. And that's the way he said it. "I just slipped right in." And so they started praying over the guy, cast out this demon. Even if you don't believe in this stuff, this guy's telling me this story, and he wasn't somebody who embellished stuff. And he was, you could tell that he was moved telling the story. Finally, the guy comes back too, and he didn't remember anything that had happened, but they started asking him about his childhood, and he fully disclosed that he grew up in a drug-filled home, abusive home. And here this guy was carrying around whatever this was for 20, 30 years, probably, 30 something years. I'm sure he was in his 30s, carrying this thing around. And when you look so how I'm equating this is that when you, whether it's drugs or comfort and laziness, whatever it may be, whatever the sin may be, or whatever whatever you are consumed by, will open you up to demonic spirits, or to, not just demonic spirits, people that are trying to corrupt you and lead you down a bad road. And listen, you may think this is completely crazy. You may have listened to this podcast. I've actually had several people write me and say, stick with the news. Don't do so much religious stuff. But listen, I'm the guy who's been all over the world, and I'm the one who's experienced all this stuff. And I'm telling you right now, God is interwoven in everything. It's why you're here, which I'm going to do a show on that eventually so you understand the reality of what's going on. But this is how profound and evil is in this world and how much it's interwoven into what's happening. And when you are in this comfort coma, this self-centered comfort coma, as a citizenry, it's the exact same thing as somebody who is in the drug coma and has become self-centered and spoiled themselves. Evil will just walk right in. It happened to that guy, and it's happened and happening to this nation. It has been here. I don't know when it came here, but I do know in 1947, which I've talked about this before, when we went from the Secretary of Defense to the Secretary of War, something was definitely happening in this nation that was moving to a position of politics over effectiveness and, a little bit more left, because that's definitely left. That's definitely a leftist type of mentality of let's have the Secretary of Defense or the Department of Defense instead of the Department of War. Now, I don't know what their thinking was behind that, but I can guarantee you that it was influenced by this feeling after World War II and after the Great Depression and all these things that things were getting back to normal and that things were really getting great. And see, the same kind of thing has happened here after 9/11. Everybody's kind of shocked and stood together. And then when things start to get back to normal, and especially when the economy is in good shape, that's when it's actually more dangerous. And it's hard to think that way, but it's very similar. Comfort is very similar to any other drug. Literally, when you are comfortable, chemicals are dumped in your brain so that you understand that this is a good thing. And the more of it you get, the harder it is to change your behavior, to do things that aren't as easy, aren't as fun, don't feel as good. So when the economy is great, the country goes into that same, it feels good, where we've got money, there's no things being reported in the news. It must be good. That's a good feeling. And you can get lost in that. Now, I'm not wishing war and bad things, and I think a great economy is incredible, but you can guard yourself against this. Just like, I've never done drugs, so I'm never going to be a drug addict because that's not a part of who I am. So I guarded myself from that. But people that don't guard themselves against it and get into that, and they get these influences that creep into them, it's the same thing with the citizenry. So, this could have gone back to the 1920s. It could have gone back to the 1800s when Marx was around. Who knows? I don't know. But there's definitely something that's here, and it's definitely gotten to the point where United States is sitting at that campfire, and we're taking turns, saying, well, what do you think? And all of a sudden, there's some demonic voice speaking, except in this case, it's the Democrat Party. And they are legion. They are legion. And they are flexing their muscle around this country and destroying things for the purpose of getting this president out of office and oppressing patriots and people who understand what the Constitution is all about and how important this whole thing is called America. It's not just important to us and our way of life, America goes away, man, you can count on just a tidal wave of communism sweeping the world. We are the one thing that has stood in front of all that stuff. You know, I talk all the time about, or I have talked in the past about how I did not agree with the Vietnam War, just like I didn't agree with the Iraqi war or Afghanistan war. Now, when I say I don't agree with them, I don't agree with the way that they were fought. I mean, I don't think that they were fought adequately when you look, and the same thing with the Korean War. Same thing with the war on drugs. Same thing with the war on poverty. You know, before 1947, when the Department of Defense said they were going to war, they eliminated the enemy. And when that changed in 47, we've never won a war since. So when I say I disagreed with these things, you know, Vietnam, we should not, that was a guerrilla war, and we should have fought it in that way. And people say, well, we shouldn't even been there. And I've had this discussion with people that were over there, but I disagree with that, because even though the deaths for a lot of people seem like they were in vain, do you realize the reason why we were there, whether it was meant to be there by the politicians or not? The reason we were there was to fight communism. And people say, well, that's just made up. It's not, you know, the Cold War was made up. Listen, we are being overran by communism right now. You can call it whatever you want, socialism, anarchy. Now that's the whole buzzword with Barr and the media. They're anarchists in Portland. Listen, they are communists. They admit that they're communists. You just have to understand what communism is. The belief that that through chaos will come a synthesis, and through that synthesis will become a classless society that has no classes of rich and poor, and there will be no state. There'll be no government. I mean, that's never existed literally since human beings began, okay? So it's not going, as soon as there was more than 10 human beings, that for sure didn't work. And there is no such thing. There will never be anything in this world that works without an authority figure somewhere in there, whether it be a chain of command or law enforcement or a government that has to make sure that things flow properly and protection is there. There will always be bad people. There will always be people who want to, narcissists and megalomaniacs and psychopaths that their quest is to control. Those things will always be here. So, you know, I can tell you that, you know, one day I remember I grew up poor, extremely poor. And I would ask my mom, you know, I'd say, man, you know, Tim is a friend of mine. Tim has this incredible three-wheeler. Do you think I could get one? Remember those three-wheelers? Those things were deadly. Remember those things? Now they're quads, they're four-wheelers, but the three-wheelers were like deadly. I'm lucky I didn't die riding on Tim's three-wheeler many, many times, but I'd say, do you think I could get one of those someday? And she would say, yeah, you know, I mean, if we get the money, you could get one for sure, you know. And I would go to school and tell everybody, my mom said I'm going to get a three-wheeler, because I was poor. And all I had was hope. Now, that never materialized because we didn't have the money. But what you see there is an example of, I'm not saying I'm communist, but what you see there is an example of how communism works. You know, all these young people and people who are left and, you know, liberal, whatever, and even people on the right are like, oh, okay, let's try it. You know, they think that because somebody tells them, this thinker from the 1800s came up with this plan called Marxism. Communism existed before him in certain forms, but this whole process of where it is now kind of has evolved from there. And they think, when they're told by people that we should do it this way, so we'll have a classless society, so that we can have no government, and people, if you can work, you work, and if you need, you take. And people are like, yeah. And then they go tell other people, I know the answer. It's called communism. It's the same thing as when I was a kid and I was poor and I didn't have anything. And then I would go and tell people, I'm going to get a three-wheeler because my mom said yes. What my mom said was, yeah, if we ever get any money, of course you could have a three-wheeler. You see, I was young, by the way. I was, I don't know, 12, 13 years old, younger, 10 to 13 years old. It was an immature mind. And I'm not saying I was an immature kid, but I was not a matured individual. I was making assumptions because I wanted something. And I'm a better man for not having it. I'm still alive. Probably if I had one, I would have died. And I'm glad that I didn't grow up extremely rich. I'm glad I grew up the way that I was. But this country, this nation, I'm glad I'm an American. I'm glad I'm free. But our problem is that we did get the four-wheeler or the three-wheeler as a nation. And we're wrecking it constantly. I hope you guys like these hillbilly type analogies because it's working for me right now. But so this whole thing that I'm talking about, the reason I'm bringing all of this stuff up is because when we look at the news and when we look at the media personalities and when we take things that we've been told and we just simply say, okay, we got it. You're not necessarily getting the truth. And if you are consumed by your comfort or you're consumed by your lifestyle or you're consumed by your opinion, you will not see the truth. You will literally make stuff up and you will not realize when those demons and those leftists and these people that are totally trying to destroy this form of government that we have that's allowed us to have so much in this country, those people will just walk right in, and that's what's happened. I mean, look at this headline. The Supreme Court denies Nevada church's appeal of COVID-19 rule. Now, here's the interesting thing there's a couple things that are very interesting about this. The governor in Nevada had put a 50-person cap on worship services in churches, right? Only 50 people could go and worship at a time. But they said that casinos, restaurants, and other businesses could operate at a 50% capacity, which means in a casino, you could have thousands of people there. And of course, they're not stopping riots and protests, which is very interesting because, actually, CNN was reporting just yesterday or the day before that riots, or they call it protests, I call it riots, they don't cause a spike in coronavirus. So that's very interesting. If that's the case, and these people are going out there shouting, screaming, sweating all over each other, and they're not causing an increase, why would you think that church is going to cause it? Because they're singing there? But a casino is not. Casinos, for some reason, they just think a casino is not going to cause it when you have thousands of people in there smoking and gambling and coughing, throwing up in some cases, I'm sure, or they can go to a restaurant, and there's only a 50. So let's say you have a restaurant that seats 300. You could have 150 people in there, but you can't have that in a worship service. See, that's the first part of this headline, is that in of itself shows you that they are structuring. That's what they call it in financial investigations. They're structuring. So they're trying to maneuver things in order to cause something to happen. And what they're doing is they know that religion is one of the main things that people cling to right now. And they know that if people are clinging to their religion and if they're able to worship, then they're going to be able to keep their heads on straight. And it's going to help, ultimately, believe it or not, it's going to help President Trump. They know that. And so they go after this. Also, the less religious a place is, the easier it is for communism to seep in. It's historically factual. It's one of the first things they go after is, in all different types of subversive groups, when they get into a nation, the first thing that they do is go after religion and freedom of speech. That's the first two things they go after. And obviously the guns. They don't want anybody being able to defend themselves. What bothers me even more about this, yesterday I talked about these leftists. The CEO and editor of the Washington Post is head of the Reagan Institute, right? So now when I look at this story, which I think is just an abomination of our freedom of religion and freedom to worship in this country, Chief Justice John Roberts, who was appointed by the Bushes, what a scumbag this guy is, right? He sides with liberals anytime he can. And it's not because he could be liberal, I don't know, but it's because I believe he is a deep stater. And Trump, any of these deep staters, they've been activated. I sound like freaking conspiracy guy, but it's true. It's as if they are robots that have been activated. And nothing, it doesn't matter what the level of position it is, they are going to go against Trump. And they are going to go against the American people because ultimately they want to go against the Constitution. And they don't give two craps about the American people. We're just a commodity. So Chief Justice John Roberts sided with the liberals in this, the liberal majority, in denying their request that came before them. And they did it without explanation. So that right there should tell you that is pointing towards the speed and the depth at which this movement is occurring, because that, my friends, is definitely something that the communist left in this country and around the world, this is what they do. They go after religion. Now, why don't you just hold on for a second? I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, and I'm going to tell you what a Bernie Sanders, former campaign manager, had to say about what it really means when you vote for Biden. And basically, it's as if you took a big bowl of heaping, you know what, and ate it. That's what she says, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Now, I know you guys hear me talk about my books all the time on this show, but I have to tell you, if you have not ordered Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, I mean, right now is the time when you should be doing that. Honestly, look around. Is anything getting safer in this country? I don't think so. And you need to start taking responsibility for your safety. You may not have law enforcement showing up at your place. So now is the time when you need to assess your threats. Now, the way you do that, the way you assess your threats, is you read Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and you apply what I teach you in that book. The first half of the book is set up to show you how attackers look at you, why they would attack, who would attack, when it would happen, where it would happen, and how it would be carried out. You divide your life into sectors, and basically, it's not rocket science. You look at yourself from their point of view. I just show you how they do it. The second half of the book shows you how to take what you've learned and then build better defenses, awareness, plans of action, and strategies to mitigate these threats of attack. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. There's 2 workbooks that go with it that you can order after that and actually apply it. Workbook number 1 is the Threat Assessment Workbook, and workbook number 2 is the Defense Assessment Workbook. So they go right along with the book. The first one is like the first half of Sheep No More. The second one is like the second half. And then, because I just didn't think that was enough for you to secure your home, I came up with a children's book with Danielle Kreiner, who did the illustration of it. We put safety, communication, and awareness lessons all in the pictures. It's called The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. And why is it a parent's book for children? Because you go to teamlittlebigs.com and get the lesson plans, hand the book of pictures to your child, and then you teach them 2 to 8 on awareness, communication, and safety. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's 2 workbooks, and The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. This is how you secure your homeland. And here's another story, okay? Again, all these things are pointing at how they're in plain sight. These people are coming out, and they're not hiding this stuff. Former Sanders campaign co-chair, Nina Turner. I'm reading this off of Fox Business, right? Nina Turner, she compares voting for Biden to eating a bowl of shit. That's basically what she said. And I'm not misquoting her. That's what she said. It's like eating a bowl of shit. And I didn't want to say crap because I don't want to misquote her. Okay. So former Bernie Sanders campaign chair Nina Turner, I'm reading this off the thing, offered a not so appetizing analogy when she was asked about voting for a presumptive Democratic nominee, Joe Biden. She then went on to say that it is like eating a bowl of shit. Well, quoted in there with her is Harvard University professor Cornel West. He's the black guy that's got the crazy goatee and the big hair, and it's always, on PBS and all these shows talking like he is some kind of, educated scholar, philosopher. And people, whenever Cornel West talks, people stop and listen. He's been on Fox News and all that. But he says something in here that's very telling about who he is and about who these people are. And see, this is not necessarily what was being pointed out by the story. It definitely wasn't in the headline. He said, we have to be true to ourselves and acknowledge that Biden is mediocre, neoliberal centrist that we've been fighting against in the Democratic establishment. That's what he said. In other words, he's not far enough left. He's not a leftist. So these scholars, these people who were trying to get Bernie Sanders elected, and the people who in the Democrat Party who will vote for Joe Biden, of course, because he's the one there, unless they come up with something else or he dies, they're going to vote for Biden, and they're going to use him as a puppet. These people are so far left that they really, literally, I'm not just saying this, it's not a conspiracy. They want to dismantle our government and change the whole thing. And they want to make it into this socialist, communist craptopia, because it's never going to be a utopia. History shows us that. So now we have Supreme Court Justice John Roberts siding with the liberal majority to keep churches from opening in Nevada for more than 50 people at a time. You have the Sanders campaign co-chair and Harvard University professor Cornel West both talking about how Biden is not left enough. So you can start to see that the process here is to get the Democrat Party as far left as possible. And there are systems in place that are helping that happen. This one's going to blow your mind, okay? Because here they go. They've already indoctrinated through the education system, but now they're using the education system to put further pressure on people so that you will totally ignore things like an education, right? Remember, Black Lives Matter, the organization, believes that the family unit, as we know it, the atomic family, or whatever they call that, is racist, right? They believe that. Well, Rutgers University has declared that grammar is racist. And it's not just some people at the university. The English department are the ones who declared that grammar is racist. Do you see the process here? It is coming at all fronts. It's coming from all fronts here, okay? And here's the thing that I want to point out about this. As I yesterday, if you didn't listen to yesterday's show, listen to it. Finish today's show. I want you to get this picture of how they're coming. It's not just the rioters. It's not just the protesters. I mean, they're not being dealt with either. but it is seeping through every aspect of the government, the education sector. It's gone far beyond just indoctrinating kids. Now they're saying that we shouldn't even teach grammar properly because that's culturally and ethnically the way that they talk, and proper grammar, which is something you actually have to work for, is racist. Same thing with the family unit. That's just their culture. Have a bunch of babies out of wedlock. Divorce. Well, they don't even get married. Babies being raised by gangs, not families. And to say otherwise is racist. And you see, they've permeated this system that has brought us and the rest of the world so many great things. In fact, there would still be slavery if we didn't have educated men that wrote the Constitution the way that they did, so that eventually those God-given rights would be given to all men and all women. I'm sure they're going to find that racist somewhere, because now they're going to say, well, white people shouldn't have all the rights. I mean, one of the Black Lives Matter executives from Canada is saying, and I think I have this here. She's saying, let's see here. Yeah, here it is. Yusra Kogali. She says that, and she's a Toronto Black Lives Matter chapter co-founder. She says that white skin is subhuman, and says she prays to Allah for the strength not to kill or harm white folks. Oh, she goes on. She says white people are recessive genetic defects. This is factual, she says. White people need white supremacy as a mechanism to protect their survival as a people, because all they can do is produce themselves. Black people, she says, simply through their dominant genes can literally wipe out the white race if we had the power to. Boy, I bet she's fun to hang out with. So, but what's interesting, she says that, right? She says those things, but yet when you look at how Chief Justice Roberts from the Supreme Court, Rutgers declaring that grammar is racist, Black Lives Matter, and saying that that the family unit is racist. Black Lives Matter in and of themselves has gotten over wait for it, $1 billion. $1 billion that has been raised in the past 7 years. Now, ask yourself, any of these people, are their decisions, are the things that they're doing, are they helping the black community? Are they bridging the gap between races? Are they bridging the gap between the police and the inner city? Are they mending the family unit? Are they helping young black men to have parents, both two-parent family, to grow up? No, they haven't done anything. Are they going in and marching through and bringing money into the inner city? No. Are they going to tell young people that, you can be whatever you want to be? No, they're not doing that. They're not doing that. And listen, that doesn't take any money. Like I said, we didn't have money growing up. But my mom always told me that I could be whatever I wanted to be. And you know what? I have been. That's all it takes. Mentorship. The NYPD, they cut their budget, and they're not defunding the NYPD, but they're greatly defunding their budget and cutting away things like the plainclothes units that work in street crime. They're getting rid of them, right? And they're saying, we're going to, this is de Blasio, his moron wife, and him and his weirdo family. He's saying, we're going to spend that money in the impoverished areas, black areas, so that we can bring them up and, make them equal, and whatever the nonsense is he's saying. All you got to do is go in there and motivate young people. It doesn't cost you any money. I know we didn't have any money. My mom motivated me. All you got to do is work with the community, and it doesn't take money. I'm talking about walk your ass down there and get to know some of these people and help them see that there's hope. That's the first thing that you can do. All these people giving money to this Black Lives Matter group that's going straight into the Democrat Party and straight to the communist movement is doing. Who do you think? It's not just George Soros. It's not just George Soros. Groups like this are the ones who organize and move these people to do these riots. But this has got to be the dumbest thing I've seen. Rutgers declaring grammar racist. I mean, we don't even, in this country, they're not even trying to motivate people to be something special anymore. No, they don't even, exceptional. They don't even know what the word exceptional means. Now, let's just sum up this picture that's been painted. Attorney General Barr, he's in, and this is the headline. Again, this is from foxnews.com. I actually looked at several of those, but Fox had a couple of these headlines. Barr to come out swinging on violent crime, Russia probe, and first House Judiciary Committee appearance. So this is his first House Judiciary Committee appearance since he was appointed. The biggest thing that should be coming out of his mouth is about communism and about the move that is happening in this country to take over and basically throw out the Constitution and our way of life. I looked through, it was leaked, quote unquote, or released, I guess you could say it was released, the first 6 pages of his speech. And while I'm not going to read all of it, I will tell you that it says some things that I'm glad he's saying. But it never mentions communism. It talks about anarchists, but it doesn't talk about Antifa that I could see in here anywhere. He may talk about that later on, but he never talks about the reality that there is an active, it used to be subversive, an active movement to overthrow the country. This is their words. I'm not making this up. He doesn't mention that anywhere here. Now, he says a lot of good things about how the injuries that have occurred to these officers in Portland that are trying to, maintain these federal buildings from being burnt down in the midst of these people. And these aren't just protesters, right? These are full-blown rioters. These are people that have, I know slingshots sound crazy, but, look, David killed Goliath with a slingshot. These are high-powered slingshots. They're using ball bearings and other pieces of metal to sling at these officers. You can kill somebody with that, by the way. They're using lasers to burn their eyes. Some of them, I think there's 3 of them that may never regain their sight again. They have explosives. They're using fireworks as explosives, as I described yesterday, but also explosives. And they are now secreting guns and firearms into these areas. And as I said yesterday, there will be officers killed. There will be officers killed because they are not doing this correctly, and because they're not naming the enemy, just like they did with the war on terror. They're not naming the enemy. They're not saying in the war on terror that it is fundamental Islam, just like they're not saying here that these are communists trying to overthrow the government. It's not mentioned anywhere in here. And that is the one thing that would allow the president to go full bore on these people with the Insurrection Act and calling up the National Guard. And speaking of the National Guard, here again, shows you how deep the leftists are in this nation. CNN Politics, National Guard major will dispute top administrative officials over decision to clear protesters near the White House. Now, remember when the president walked to the church that had been burnt the day before? Okay. You see the totality of the circumstances. Nobody talks about that. The church had been burnt the day before right outside the White House. There were people that were rioting the day before in Washington, D.C., and that night, actually. So when the president wants to go over and do a photo op in front of that church, standing in solidarity with the American people against these rioters, and showing that he won't be pushed around by them. I think it was a very important, I don't think it was the smartest call to do that photo op, but it was a very important photo op nonetheless. They go over there, he takes his whole cabinet over there, he takes a picture over there, and then he goes back, and they push these protesters back. Now, first of all, I don't know who's giving out all these permits for these protesters, but they pretty much can do whatever they want. They can go shut down a freeway, which is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. They can shut down the ability of people to get to a hospital or get to work, so they're hurting the economy. They're out there with no masks, and I guarantee you, look at the gym. They walked in like gangbusters and arrested the gym owner and took him to jail in New Jersey. But here, that was my Ring camera going off, by the way. And I'm going to leave it in there. I could have edited that out. I'm going to leave it in there because I think it's funny. But they went and got this gym owner out with gangbusters, but yet if the cops stand up to protesters, then they're evil, right? In Washington, D.C. and around the country, in Portland, everything. It's the same nonsense that comes from the media. Now, this National Guard major, because the White House is reporting that they were throwing frozen water bottles and they were causing fights and doing different things. And of course, the left is saying, no, that didn't occur, that there was a nonviolent protest. They call these things nonviolent protests every day. And we see what's happening around the country, right? So this major from the National Guard is going to come in front of Congress. I think it's going to be today. I'm not sure actually when it's going to be. And he's going to, it's going to be on, today, Tuesday. And he's going to tell them that the decision to forcibly clear protesters from a park outside of the White House last month was made even though demonstrators were acting peacefully, a view at odd with comments by top Trump administrative officials. But now here is the thing about this DeMarco guy who described himself as one of the senior National Guard officials on the scene, which at the end of this story, actually, it's changed now from when I read it earlier because they had to do a clarification. They said that this story has been updated to remove the description of Major Adam DeMarco as a top National Guard official. That's what they say, but it still says that he describes himself that way. I guess they were describing him that way. So that's interesting how they say it's been changed, but yet they leave it in there, just say that he did it versus just describing him that way. It's also been updated with, get this, additional context about his role that day. And wait for it, he ran for the Maryland's 3rd congressional district in 2018 as a Democrat. This guy should be, not only should he be booted out of the National Guard, the DC National Guard, he should not be allowed to appear in front of Congress because they're going to parade him just like they did Vindman during the whole congressional nonsense about the leaker from the White House. It's just ridiculous. This guy should have no part of this. He just has political motives. But for Congress to be pulling somebody in that wasn't in charge, that was just somebody that was there and has political motives, I just find that absolutely, well, it's criminal. I believe it's criminal for them to pinpoint people to bring in. Listen, this isn't a court of law, okay? This is Congress, and their investigations go nowhere. And for them to be taking time to particularly choose somebody that was a political candidate in 2018 on their side this stuff is so ridiculous and so unethical and borderline criminal because overall, and I think this is what I'm going to leave you with again today, okay, is that when we look at the big picture, okay, when we look at the totality of the circumstances of all these things that are happening, whether it be the riots, whether it be the Supreme Court going against allowing more than 50 people to worship in Nevada, when they're allowing casinos to open at 50% capacity and thousands of people to come in there, whether it is the corrupt politicians are going to allow a hand-picked leftist former Democrat candidate major from the National Guard to come in and testify against Trump. All of these things that we are seeing and that I pointed out in shows before is giving you a well-rounded picture of how fast and how deep the leftists are moving in this country. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and we're out of here.